Now we're going to move on to our next guest for today's episode, who got some big news at the quarterback position here this week, and certainly some news that I was very happy about, being a Louisiana boy myself. We're going to bring in James Rapien of the Locked On Bengals podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at James Rapien. James, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Good, man. Good to see you.
Good to see you, James. I want to start things off, too, with this question, because I know the debate, and I know that you and Jake have had this discussion on the podcast multiple times. We saw in the NFL draft that they decided to reunite Joe Burrow with one of his best targets at the collegiate level in LSU, and Jamar Chase, and the offensive line has still been a question. But first off, we talk about ACL recovery. We saw the new jerseys. We saw that nice scar that Joe Burrow had. How are things progressing for him at this point of the offseason coming off of ACL?
I think about as well as could be expected. I know he threw to Jamar Chase earlier this week. Speaking of that connection, that's the first time that the two have linked up since 2019 in LSU versus Clemson, right? So I think he was probably pretty excited to do that. And yeah, the Dr. Neil Elatrash obviously reporting or texting, to Adam Schefter earlier this week. And I know Burrow was in Los Angeles last weekend to undergo tests and test out that knee, and everything seems to be pointing in the right direction, where not only is he going to be back week 1, but clearly he's allowed to throw to receivers on a regular basis. I know Burrow's worked out, and like I said, with Jamar Chase, but he's also reached out to some of these other guys, the veterans that aren't necessarily expected to be there over the next few weeks during OTAs. And I think he's trying to make sure that they're there, because he didn't get to throw to these guys in person last year because of COVID, and he's not letting the ACL recovery get in the way. So I don't know how much we'll see media-wise from Burrow during OTAs, but I do think he's going to be working with these guys behind the scenes.
Look, I'm very excited to see Joe Burrow here in 2021. It was such a pleasure to get to watch him while he was available in 2020. Of course, unfortunately, going down with that injury. And I know a lot of folks look at the Jamar Chase selection in the draft, and I imagine that the fan base is kind of split there, just like most of national media is split in terms of going Jamar Chase, going with the wide receiver as opposed to the offensive lineman. What do you have to say to folks that are concerned that the Bengals didn't go after an offensive lineman in the first round?
Well, it's easy to be concerned because the offensive line's been an issue for the past 5 years. So I get it. And I'm not going to tell people that they're wrong.
Right.
At the same time, the Bengals clearly had Jamar Chase ahead of Penei Sewell. I mean, I look back to that December Monday, it was Monday night in December. The Bengals and Ryan Finley beat Pittsburgh at Paul Brown Stadium. And there's a big Penei Sewell sign in the stands. So fans have had their eyes on Sewell. And so for the Bengals to go the opposite way, right, is pretty telling. And I think fans really, since December to you fast forward to the draft last month, and it changed. It started to become a 50-50, as you mentioned. And now I think even more see the vision with Jamar Chase. So yes, protecting Burrow, absolutely an issue. They went after Jackson Carman. They think he can give them a lot of what Penei Sewell was going to give them in year 1. And they just thought Jamar Chase was the better prospect. And time will tell if they're right. Is it a risk? Absolutely. But if Penei Sewell is the next insert whatever offensive lineman the Bengals have drafted in the first round over the past 6 years that they've gotten wrong, and I'm not saying he is that, but if so, or if he's just an average lineman and Jamar Chase is the next Julio Jones, then no one's going to be complaining about it a few years from now. So the Bengals are banking on Chase, and I think that's where it comes from. They just had him higher on their board.
Well, we just talked about, Joe Burrow reuniting with, one of his teammates, Jamar Chase. Well, Thaddeus Moss is now a Cincinnati Bengal. Now, I didn't quite know what happened with the Washington football team last year. I know that for him, I think he was dealing with an injury. Is there any chance he's in line to maybe make the 53 this year, or has that already been established, or is he going to have to earn that in training camp?
I think he's definitely going to have to earn it. And I think that there are some young tight ends that they've brought in, Pro Wells from TCU, an undrafted free agent. They also added the kid from Arkansas, CJ O'Grady. And so he's in that pool of guys that if they contribute on special teams and show they can help out Darren Simmons in that special teams unit, and maybe catch a few passes here and there, they can make the team. But I don't think it's a sure thing by any stretch. And that rapport with Burrow helps. Obviously, being friends with Joe Burrow helps. But I think he's certainly going to have to earn it over the next few weeks and then obviously months as we look ahead to training camp.
Now, there's always been, and I have the great pleasure of covering the Saints, so I see the Ohio to Louisiana connection all the time. But there's a big time Louisiana to Ohio connection as well. Cam Sample out of Tulane heading over to Cincinnati in this draft as well. What can you tell us so far about this draft class for Cincinnati and some of the expectations that are there?
Man, I mean, they got bigger. They got bigger in the trenches. And that's the thing is, I think a lot of people see, they went for the flash with Jamar Chase and not Penei Sewell, not the tackle that's going to be there for the next decade. Well, maybe that's the case. We'll see. But 7 of their 10 draft picks were trench players, 4 defensive linemen, 3 offensive linemen. And when I was at rookie minicamp a couple of weeks ago, these guys are they're big. They're physical. They look physical from just their presence. It's not like they had pads on and stuff, but you mentioned the Louisiana connection. Tyler Shelvin out of LSU. Big. I mean, this guy made Cam Sample look small, and Cam Sample's big, right? So it's that they certainly wanted to attack the lines of scrimmage, and that was part of their goal in this draft, and that's what they did. So that's my biggest takeaway. Absolutely, did they get another playmaker in Jamar Chase for Joe Burrow, but you also add all these trench players to hopefully get better in what is, we all know, a really, really physical AFC North. And not only did they need to protect Burrow, but they needed to get better at getting after opposing quarterbacks and shutting down the run. So we'll see if they can do that, but that's certainly their vision and was their logic behind their 2021 draft class.
Love it. Well, the final thing I'm going to ask you here, James, we did get a chance to speak with you during our NFL schedule release show, but Ross and I were talking about it. And when we look at the additional playoff spot in the AFC and in the NFC in terms of the wild card, there was a conversation I had where I felt like there could be 3 teams from the AFC West, 3 teams from the AFC North potentially who could have 3 spots in the playoffs. And for you, I mean, looking at this division, you have the Baltimore Ravens, obviously a strong team there. Pittsburgh, kind of still up in the air, in my opinion. And then the Cleveland Browns, who got better. But then I think the Bengals absolutely got better this offseason. And they were relatively competitive last year, despite the fact that they were taking some shots and they were missing some key guys. Where do you see the Bengals this year in that AFC North division?
It's tough to pick them higher than 4th, given how tough the division is, right? But the path to them surprising people starts with Burrow getting the clearance that he got last week from Dr. Neil Elatrash and hopefully being 100%. So far, so good in that department. And then the schedule early on, there are some winnable games. I think Minnesota at home, that's a winnable game. Now, Mike Zimmer's a hell of a coach, and I think they're going to be better than they were last year, but that's better than opening up with Cleveland, right? Or opening up with a Baltimore, a team that's ran all over them in recent seasons. So I think the key is getting off to a good start. Can they start 4-2 or 3-3? Just get a little bit of momentum. So when they go to that mid part of their schedule where it's tough, where you're going on the road to Cleveland, you're going on the road to some of these tough places, Pittsburgh, right? That you can go there confidently. And so we'll see if they could do that. But getting off to a good start, because if they get off to a 2-4, 2-5 start, I think heads could roll. Maybe not head coach Zach Taylor, defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo. They've invested a lot of resources in free agency and in the draft in the defense. So if the defense struggles early, keep an eye there. And then on offense, what more could you ask for if you're Zach Taylor, this offensive-minded coach, in what is a prove-it year? You got Burrow. If he's healthy, you have Chase, you have Higgins, you have Boyd. The offensive line should be improved. And you have Joe Mixon in the backfield. So you got to go out, you got to put up points. And if they do that early, I think they can get some momentum. But it's tough because if they get off to a slow start, 6-25-1 over the past 2 years, that's tough to overcome if you start out 2-4, 2-5.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, y'all, James and Jake do a phenomenal job over at Locked On Bengals every Monday through Friday covering the Cincinnati Bengals. So if you want to keep up with them, make sure that you search Locked On Bengals on your favorite podcast provider. James, appreciate you taking the time to join us today, man.
Of course. Thanks for having me, guys. Take care.